Okay, well, great to have you. This is Greg Stenstrom, forensic investigator and gadfly of the the deep state in Pennsylvania. I don't think they like you too much, no. But Patriots love you. So let's get into it. What happened in Fayette County? And I'll show the article in the newspaper there.
Sure. Actually, we thought it was a fair, a pretty, as far as newspaper reporting goes. I talked to the fellow who wrote the article is a guy named Mike Jones, young guy, and I thought he did a fair piece of reporting. Wasn't spot on, but it was pretty well balanced. So I encourage people to read it. This is the Observer Reporter. I was looking at the Herald Standard. But he wrote a pretty fair piece there. So some corrections. They've got one of the things that they've said is, and we made accusations, but we didn't actually make accusations, that we had received a whistleblower information that Governor Shapiro had flown out with a medium-sized jet to take the election machines out of Fayette County. So when people talk about election machines, the scanner is only about yay big. People who have, when they voted and when they put the paper ballot through, the actual scanner in the machine is only about that big. It's pretty small. And in Fayette County, they have 77 precincts, and my understanding is they only used 78 machines. So these 78 scanners, they're pretty small, about yay big, and they would fit in a couple of backpacks, quite frankly, maybe two or three. That's the size of them. And they used one per precinct, and then they used one back at the courthouse or the election center, the voting machine warehouse, to run the mail-in ballots through. So while they have 77 precincts, they had 78 scanners. So those are the quote-unquote election machines and Dominion machines. And one of the things the article said that we had made accusations that that Josh Shapiro had flown out in a jet. Now, that part's true. He did fly out in, it's a turboprop, actually. I think it's a King Air, for people who are familiar with airplanes. Fair size plane. We have the flight logs for it. It left Northeast Philadelphia, flew to Connellsville, and then Connellsville flew to Latrobe. So we had a lot of questions. But one of the things that we did is we put in an emergency injunction requiring them to secure all election materials, including the machines. So they conflated that into that we were making accusations that the governor took those machines or was going to take those machines. And what we said was, hey, we have credible witnesses that say that's the plan. And, Governor, he had no reason to be there, still hasn't accounted really for why he was there. They did have a short meeting in Connellsville, a short press event where they talked about pretty much nothing. Talked about I think a $12 million grant that they had gotten for open spaces and parks, which was really not a really good reason for them to fly out there with an entourage. And it doesn't explain the three huge backpacks that we got on video of them putting in his plane. So there was a lot of conjecture there. And we tried to resolve that with the court order that said, we want to know why he was there and what the election officials' communications with him were, and try to get to the bottom of it. So the newspaper kind of over-reported on that, but it wasn't a horrible mix-up. But one of the things that they got wrong was the judge didn't throw us out. So as a matter of fact, we just got the transcript from the judge because we weren't quite sure what happened ourselves in the court. It was a very brief hearing. And in the hearing, what we couldn't really hear, not that the sound was bad, but what Judge Wagner said was he hears emergency injunctions on Wednesday mornings. And the judges rotate through for emergency hearings. So there's a motions court Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. That's the process. And there's a judge assigned each day at 9 a.m. to hear emerging or urgent motions, and then to hear motions that are assigned to them by the president judge. The president judge is Judge Lesnick. So what we couldn't get quite clear, and we didn't hear it, and I think Judge Wagner assumed that we knew because he's been there a while, and the assumption was, he said, look, I'm not assigned to this case. Judge Lesnick has assigned Judge George to this case, to the case 1759. And he says, I'm not assigned to this case. And he says, is there an emergent issue? And he let me speak. And I said, the emergency issue is that they had legally certified the vote. And he says, well, they've already certified it, right? And I said, well, yes. And he says, well, then, I'm not going to take that as an emergency, so I'm not going to hear the case. Now, not knowing what really happened, we were sitting there kind of stunned. We thought we were going to have a hearing. And Judge Wagner, it was more of a miscommunication. He said, your case is scheduled, but it's not scheduled with me. It's scheduled with Judge George's. So Judge George, I think, hears cases, on Monday. So it was a legitimate schedule issue, and we didn't understand quite what happened. So what he said in his hearing was he didn't toss the case out, which is what was reported. Judge Wagner tossed the case out. Well, I didn't think he tossed the case out. What I heard was he just wasn't going to hear it. It's a big difference from dismissing the case, tossing the case out. That's a conflation. He just said, it's not my case.
Okay.
We couldn't hear that, or we really didn't understand because it went by so quick. And I tried to ask him,
Can you explain, for our audience, what are the election defects that were, this was in the election for county commissioner in 2022 or what?
It's county commissioner for this year.
Okay.
So there's a few candidates running, and we're just going to stick to the Republican candidates. John was the third highest vote getter, supposedly, over a guy named Scott Dunn, I believe, and the other guy's Lohr, Lohr, and they're the incumbents. So Fayette County has got two Republican incumbent commissioners, and they've got one incumbent Democrat, and I think it's Vince Elicides or something, close to that. If I slaughtered his name, it's goes by Vince Elicides, I think. So those are the incumbents. And what's interesting is they campaigned together, and they've been a triumvirate there that campaigned together. So of course, during the 2020 election and 2022, there were problems with the election. Dunn and Lohr, and specifically Dunn, were campaigning on election integrity. And let's take a look at the ballots, and they pressed to look at the ballots and make sure there was election integrity. And now that it's them involved, they don't want to have election integrity now that it involves them. So that's the situation. So John Marietta, he runs as the hillbilly. He's a local. He's been there, lived his whole life there, 61 years, married to the same woman for 41 years, kids, grandkids. He's embedded in Fayette County and well known. He's actually the recorder of deeds, which is an elected position there. It's a row office. He ran for that 2 years ago. Previous to that, he was a meat cutter. He's just a pretty humble guy. And I've had a lot of long conversations with him. And he's, Fayette County is the third poorest county in Pennsylvania. Yet, in terms of natural resources, it's one of the richest counties. They're sitting on an ocean of oil, an ocean of natural gas, enough coal to power the United States for 200 years. They have pipelines. They're on the Monongahela River, which goes to the Ohio, which goes to the Mississippi. The United States of America was built, and this is no overstatement. The United States was built on the back of Fayette County. It's quite a history there.
Are they mining it at this time?
No, there's no, all industry is dead there. Basically, they live off the government teat. whatever the government, the state and federal government doles out to them is pretty much what they live on.
That's because of the environmental EPA restrictions, or
pretty much. I mean, they've shut down coal, they shut down oil, they've shut down natural gas. I mean, you stick a pipe in the ground there, and it's like the old show. Oh, it was the Beverly Hillbillies. The gold. Gold bubbles up. Black gold, Texas tea. That's Fayette County, and to have that be the third poorest county in Pennsylvania is a travesty. And so John just said, "Hey, look, I think I can do better. He's a humble meat cutter, but he said, he's got a lot of common sense. And he's got a lot of integrity. And he said, I can do better. We deserve better." So it's interesting. I've been talking to the Democrat, the outsider Democrat, Dino. I'm trying to remember Dino's last name, but he's running against Vince Elcides, who's the Democrat commissioner. So it's two, quote unquote, two Republicans and one Democrat. They run. I don't think they've ever voted against each other on anything. There's no adversarial party there. So, Dino's got the same concerns. He wanted to do the election checks and look at the ballots, do the recounts and so forth to see what the real situation was. So they shot him down. So I just got off the phone with them, and it looks like they're going to run together. I think it's a low percentage we're actually going to get John Marietta, the hillbilly, on the ballot. The ballots will be printed up in a week or so, 2 weeks. They're going to proceed with an illegally certified vote. No recounts.
So you're talking these were primaries then? That's
the primary in May. Yeah, I'm sorry if I'm not being clear. I appreciate your help, but what's at issue here is a primary that they ran on May 16th, and that primary there's a lot of problems with it. So what the Board of Elections did, which is 3 lawyers, 2 who live in the county, the other one doesn't even live in the county. He's a federal judge actually. Who lives in D.C. and Virginia. We don't even know why he's on the Board of Elections. So the 3 Board of Election members and then the 2 solicitors, Jack Purcell and Cheryl Hyde are the 2 solicitors there. They reported that there was only one error out of 77 counties. We only found one error. It was during the hand recount. John actually secured a court order in a separate set of petitions early on, where he was allowed to do a recount of 6 precincts out of the 77. And what they did is they presented him 1,487 ballots. And of the 1,487 ballots, what they contended was that of all the ballots and the mail-in ballots, that there was only one error. That was what the Board of Elections and the solicitors said. There's only one error, and that is well below, I think that's 0.0039% error rate. The error rate that's allowed in elections without demanding an immediate recount is 0.5%. So they could actually tolerate 1 out of 200 errors, and then they can they can certify the vote.
Right.
But anything above that, they have to do a recount.
Right.
So when we did the recount for the 6 precincts, what they did to John was, even though the court had ordered the Board of Elections to produce all of the CVRs, cast vote records, all of the ballots, and all of the envelopes, the Board of Elections fought like hell for 98 days. And they finally agreed that if John covered one eye and hopped on one foot and rubbed his belly, they were going to show the ballot through a pane of glass. We have a photo of it we'll put on the next show. So he sat there for 2 days with his wife and a couple of other people, and one of them was a Democrat. Dino was there. Another one of the election commissioners, Elliott, was there, and they did a hand tabulation over a 2-day period because it was painstaking. They would put the ballot up, and they're sitting there, and they're trying to get up to the glass, They weren't allowed cameras. The only thing they could use was a pencil and a piece of paper. And they did a hand tally of these 1,487 ballots. Well, they found 41 errors. On the mail-in ballots alone, they only had 187 mail-in ballots. That's it. They didn't even produce all the mail-in ballots for the 6 precincts. We don't know why. They didn't even produce all of the in-person ballots. So he's got a subset of a subset of mail-in ballots, 187. On the 187 mail-in ballots, we had a 9% error. I think that was 22 errors. And that's a vote that's given from one person to another person, meaning it's a misrecording of the vote. A 9% error rate, what that indicates is that's a complete fugazi. They just made that number up. And the reason for that is the scanning machines, they're calibrated. Those scanners are calibrated to make no more than one error out of 1.5 million scanned ballots. The scanners don't make mistakes. So when they do a risk limiting audit, and I'll give that as an example, they say, well, we're just going to take the ballots and rescan them and make sure the scanner didn't make any mistakes. And they said, hey, look, there's no errors. There can't be any errors. A scanner is always going to, be right. Now, as long as they put in a thing called a ballot definition document, and we're getting too technical now. But the bottom line was an automatic recount for all counties is required if they're over 0.5%. They're at 9% on the mail-in ballots and 1%. I think there were 17 errors in the scanned in-person ballots.
So they were able to see something, even though they were behind the glass. They were able.
Oh yeah, they counted it up. I have all the tally sheets, and we put a spreadsheet in.
And what kinds of errors? What were the kind of errors that they saw?
They were misvotes, meaning a vote was counted for one candidate, and it should have been counted for the other candidate. It's literally, instead of voting for John Marietta, it gave the vote to Dunn or Lohr. You see what I'm saying? Oh yeah, that's the errors. The errors we're talking about are miscast votes. So you can't get a 9%. Now think about that. A 9% error on 187.
So let me just ask so I understand. So they're looking at the I guess the ballots, not at the outside envelopes.
No, these are the physical ballots.
The physical ballots, and their a vote for John Marietta. Where okay, you would see like a dot for John Marietta, and where would it be reported that it was for somebody else?
That's when they looked at it. You could see that what they did is they did a count for that. Thank you for that. So they take the precinct. You had Bullskin 1, Bullskin 2, and a few of the other precincts there, Darby Borough. So these are relatively small boroughs and small precincts. So what they did is they tallied them up for the whole precinct. So if John Marietta was supposed to get,
I see. That's looking at the totals.
That's the only way we could do it. So if he's supposed to get 100 votes, they reported he got 100, and they reported Dunn got 120, and then Lohr got 100. Well, these precincts are pretty small. John, in the entire county of the 77 precincts, only 121 votes separated him from the other two.
Right.
Okay, so you get a 9% error rate in only 5 precincts, and you haven't looked at the 77.
Right.
What we've contended now is not so much that John won, as we don't know who the hell won.
Right.
We don't know who won, and neither do they. So the Board of Elections has been fighting tooth and nail. They won't allow us to look at these records. These are public records in accordance with Act 77, which is the election law here. And they won't allow us to do a recount, even though they're way, way over the envelope. They're 1.72% aggregate for mail-in and in-person. They're required to do a recount. Now, the board knew this, and we submitted a new lawsuit last Monday John and I'm his authorized representative. I'm an elector in Pennsylvania. So he's allowed to have an authorized representative, and I am one of the people of Pennsylvania. So I have a right to see the public records too. So we both have standing. Him as a candidate, me as an authorized representative, and an elector in Pennsylvania, to ask for these records. So when we pointed out the fact that the error rate was far in excess of the required number to kick off a recount, what the board did was they submitted. We couldn't find any record of a public announcement. We have the emails now that show that they snuck in a public hearing. They did put in a public notice. We couldn't find it. It was not Google. We couldn't Google it. We couldn't find it. We went through the papers, and they put it in the Herald Standard, which is a local paper. But we have an email that after receiving our notification in our court case that said, we want to have an emergency hearing to show that the county lied, that the Board of Elections, that's a flat out lie. These are 3 attorneys too, including a federal judge, that they committed perjury. They perpetrated fraud in the court. The solicitors, Purcell and Hyde, perpetrated fraud on the court. And we put that in there. It says, you said there was one error. You know darn well that the error rate was off the charts. They snuck in a public hearing. They didn't say what it was for. They said, we're going to discuss the election results. And then they certified the vote. So that's where Judge Wagner was sitting there going, hey, they certified the vote. Whether that's legal or illegal, I can't hear that case right now. Right. He said, resubmit it. And this is what he gives the instructions, and we just couldn't understand them. He says there's 4 other judges. 2 of them are on the ballot, and 2 of them have other reasons. One judge already recused herself. She said, I can't hear this. The other 3 can't hear it either. So he said, once it goes through them, right, it's probably going to end back up on my desk.
Right, yeah. Okay.
So then I'll hear it. So we're going to get heard next week on Wednesday. In the meantime, John and Dino are probably going to run together, Democrat and Republican. And what they're showing is they're saying this is about transparency and protecting the American people. But having said that, I know we're running out of time. Fayette County is still in play. John and I will be submitting this request for emergency hearing. We submitted an underlying complaint. We'll be heard again in court probably Wednesday by Judge Wagner. And then we're submitting another case to the Commonwealth Court under election law. The election law appeals, and they call it latches. The timing is all expired. And the county and the Board of Elections, the people that made it expire, they played the game and they said, well, you've run out of time. Well, they are the ones that ran the clock out, not John. Right. And they committed fraud. So we're going to submit that to the Commonwealth Court and said they perpetrated fraud, and the Commonwealth Court should remedy that by putting John on the ballot. If John gets on that ballot, and they haven't printed him up yet, he's going to win, and so will Dino. So what they're going to do is, if they can get on the ballot, great. If they can't get on the ballot, they're going to run together anyways. They're going to write John in. And in the lower court, we're going to hold these election officials who committed fraud. Five attorneys, licensed barred attorneys, committed fraud, and we're going to hold them accountable. So in the meantime, I'm going to just do a quick brief on what we're doing here in
Delaware County.
Give me the screen share real quick. I'll just show you like a 30-second, 10 seconds here. I'm going to show you what we're doing here.
Go ahead.
Oh, there we go. So I'm sharing this screen right now. What we were able to do is we were able to take photographs, and on the left side of your screen, that's our photograph. So we photographed 29,000 mail-in ballots. The envelopes. This is the outer envelope. This is what an outer envelope looks like. Now, what their contention was is that, well, the envelope is signed and dated, and that's all we have to look at. As a forensic computer examiner, I'm looking for how it got ingested into the system. So when I'm looking at the screen. If my eyes are looking at this, because I'm looking at the other screen. But you'll notice here, we took this photograph, and you'll see this vertical number. It says 050823 123104. You see that in the vertical there. Right. And you'll see this on the right-hand side is the image that the mail scanner that's sitting in the centralized counting center in Delaware County, that's the picture it takes. And you'll notice that that's not there. Now, that should be there. And second of all, the mail sorter in Delaware County doesn't use this date timestamp on the left-hand side. They put a dash in. So I'm going to play this comparison real quick, and it goes by pretty quick. But what you'll notice is on the left-hand side, which are the actual photographs we took, there's all different date timestamps.
Right.
So we counted these mail-in ballots went through 4 separate scanners. Wow. 4 separate mail servers. Now, they're alleging that they only put it through 1. So I said, well, where did these come from?
Right.
And they lied. They absolutely lied about where they came from and how they were sorted and how they were processed. So we don't know where they came from. And the second of all is we don't know when they were counted. And we don't think they were counted on Election Day. And you're going to start hearing in Georgia, Arizona, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, they keep quiet about us. But I've been talking about batch files now for a couple of years. What a batch file is if they count the vote before, or they want to corrupt the vote, they can create a whole CVR, cast vote record, that they can tabulate and batch before the election. It may be a little confusing, but the bottom line in Delaware County is we're doing a forensic analysis now of these envelopes. And it was a battle. You'll notice there are signatures here, and we're not trying to hurt anyone's privacy, but the Supreme Court in Doe v. Reed, I'm just going to come back here. I think people have seen enough of that. When you sign something like a attestation, a declaration specifically in voting, or you sign a petition, right, that's a public document. So the envelopes are public records, and we're allowed to look at them. We're allowed to look at the signatures. And, to kind of wrap it up here, what we're seeing consistently in Pennsylvania, and the Secretary of the Commonwealth here, Al Schmidt, and the governor are out of their minds because they're saying, well, you can't look at the signatures. Why can't we look at the signatures? You can't look at the envelopes. Why can't we look at the envelopes? They're public records. God forbid we should be able to do a recount on the ballots. Now, what I said to John Marietta, and one of the things that can close this out, is if we get an order again from the judge, he's already issued the order once before and they ignored it, but right, they didn't push it. I'll push it, and John will push it. If the judge will give the same order he gave 2 weeks ago to let us do a recount, I can take those pictures of the mail-in ballots, the ballots, mail-in ballots, there's 4,000 of them, and the 16,000 in-person ballots. I can do that in a few hours. We have the equipment, the cameras, the tripods, they're all remote. We bring in 5 people. We can run through those 20,000 ballots in a couple of hours, almost as fast as the machine can do it. And then I put them through the computer. We can get a recount. We can get this all done in an hour or two. And that's the technology that I've been working on with Patriot Online and my group. We have the technology to go through and look at envelopes very quickly, compare them to the national change of address, compare them to real estate records, compare them to voter records, compare them to the SURE database. So we can very, very rapidly determine what envelopes should be challenged. And then we can also go through ballots, and we can tear through them in a few hours. So when these people say, well, it'll take weeks to do a recount, this is a huge expense to the county, I said to John, hey, we'll do it for free. We'll come down. We'll take pictures of all the ballots. We'll tell you who won once we see the hand recount. And if that hand recount doesn't match what they reported, and we have good reason to, good suspicion that they won't, because of the 6 counties, we already have a 9% error rate on the mail-in ballots. There's 4,000 to go. What do you think? And they had 3 months to fix this. So after 3 months, they still have a 9% error rate. What happens when they have 4,000 mail-in ballots, and we go and we look through them? It'll take a few hours to go through them. If the judge makes them comply with his order, they're pretty worried. So that's where we are. We're pressing forward with the court cases in Delaware County. We're pressing forward with court cases in Fayette. We're working with people in Chester County, and they're pressing forward with court cases there. And our goal is to secure the election in November and hopefully May. I mean, we're doing what we can to get election integrity for November. We're implementing technology, lawsuits, and so forth to make them comply with the law. And well, they're saying, well, you're a bunch of election deniers. So we're not deniers, but even Santa Claus checks his list twice. So for people who believe in Santa Claus, but and then this is so if he's checking his list twice, we're saying, hey, we just want to check the receipts. Let's see the receipts. We're going to do an audit. And they're saying no.
Yeah. So let me ask you a question. Look, everything that you're saying seems reasonable, at least reasonable enough for the judge to deal with what you're saying instead of smears and attacks and labels.
Right.
Are there any conscientious judges in Pennsylvania and nationwide and in the Supreme Court?
I believe so. I'm gonna address that. Our basic premise, the reason Leah Hoops, who wrote the book The Parallel Election with me, our basic premise is there are good people out there. There are good judges out there, and there's good judges in Fayette County. Judge Wagner's a good, we looked at his rulings. In every single case, Judge Wagner has ruled in accordance with the law. And Judge Wagner is a lawful judge. He really is. He takes off his, he doesn't want to hear politics.
Right.
He doesn't want to hear drama. He says, look, what does the law say?
Okay.
If the law says that you have to do a recount, you're going to darn well do a recount. So that's why we're very, I'm going to say optimistic. It's not that we're wishing or hopeful.
Right.
Judge Wagner has voted in accordance with the law every time. So if we go in there Wednesday and we have the law on our side, which we believe we do, right, our expectation is Judge Wagner will, he's going to follow the law. And that's all we ask of these judges. And there's good judges out there as long as people press them. The big problem we're having is no lawyers want to take this on. And that's the reason we're pro se.
Yeah, I just want to tell people that you and Leah have represented yourselves. And I think you said in the meeting last week that the value of your attorney, the legal work that you've done would have cost at least $3 million.
3.2, yeah. We've been keeping score. So if we had tried to do this with lawyers, it would have been 3.2 million. Now, John Marietta spent this is a humble man. I just said he's a meat cutter.
Right.
He's got a public job, which is, it's five-figure job.
Right.
$60,000 or $70,000 county job. He was a humble meat cutter before. He spent $30,000 of his own money paying for the lawyer who I think was ineffective. I'm not going to say anything more than he was ineffective.
Right.
And he ran out of money. And that's the strategy that they're using. Is
wear people down.
They terrorize the people who want to do something, and then they terrorize the lawyers. Right. So if the judge said to me, "Are you a lawyer?" I said, "No, I'm pro se. I'm a pro se plaintiff." And now the other attorney said I had no right to be there. I'm like, I'm a pro se plaintiff. I have every right. As a matter of fact, the Constitution states that the bringing a pro se complaint before a court is a sacrosanct right, that we are the sovereigns of the court. So I have more right to be there than him. So the bottom line is these pro se people, this has to be done pro se because the attorneys are terrorized. Our first attorney, Deborah Silver, going back to the case we filed on November 4th of 2020, they went after her with meat cleavers, and they tried to disbar her. Every single attorney, honest attorney, who tried to represent the people and the candidates and advocate for election integrity, the 65 Project, which these people are demented, and we know they're involved in going after Lee and me. We've been sued. I think we're on our fifth or sixth lawsuit. We just got a new one yesterday. We've been sued 6 times now. We've been sanctioned 7 times at this point for millions of dollars. And they've come after us very, very hard.
And you've won, right?
We won, yeah. They haven't succeeded in any of them. The 6 of the sanctions were dismissed. There's another case with sanctions against us. Those will be dismissed as well. What they're meant to do is, a common citizen who doesn't represent themselves pro se.
Right.
Can you imagine trying to represent yourself against sanctions from people who are willing to lie? The worst thing in a courtroom is a solicitor or a lawyer willing to corrupt himself or herself.
Right.
It's a terrifying situation to be sued by people who are willing to lie.
Now, if they do commit perjury in court, can they be? You countersued them, right? Some of them.
Yeah, we're coming back at them. We said, hey, we reserved our right. We said, look, you're sending so much our way, and they're trying to bury us in paperwork. That we said, hey, we're just going to save the sanctions and the Dragon Eddy actions and the fines. We're saving them to the end, and we're going to countersue you at the end. So every one of our filings says is reserve the right. We're not going to adjudicate these things until the end. But when this is done, there'll be a reckoning. And one last thing is that one of the things that Leah and I have learned and we've gotten good at is, one of their strategies. When I say their strategies, and I call them misanthropes. This isn't I think the Republicans hate us worse than the Democrats. When I say the DNC corporate body and the RNC corporate body, we're not fighting Republicans down. We're fighting these corporate bodies.
Right.
They hate us equally. And they are trying to bury people. That's what they do. They're burying Kerry Lake out there. Kurt Olson's the attorney out there in Maricopa. And they're making headway out there. But their goal is to bury us. But we're at a point now where we know every filing. We kind of know their tricks of the trade, and we're able to respond pretty quickly now. Right. And we've kind of turned the thing around on them. We says, listen, the burden of proof, the burden of production is not on us. You've made this thing into you crazy election deniers have no evidence. Well, we do have evidence. We have video. We have evidence of the corruption and the fraud, video admissions and documents that we've been able to get. We can definitely prove the fraud with hard physical evidence. But when it comes right down to it, the evidence is the ballots and the envelopes. So they have the burden of production on their side. So what we're doing now is we've turned the tables and we've submitted right to know requests, Office of Open Records requests, FOIA requests, and Leah just filed, I think we filed 20 subpoenas demanding these records. And now they're panicking. Now it's not that we're burying them. It's just they can't hide the evidence anymore. And their heads are exploding, not only in Pennsylvania and Delaware County, but in the other counties as well. Everyone's used this tactic. I mean, one of the things on the blueprint for deception, the subtitle of the book, Parallel Election, is a blueprint for deception, is once you have these X-ray vision, once you have these night vision goggles on, where you understand what they're doing and how they're perpetrating the fraud, which we understand now, we're able to turn the tables a bit and say, hey, we responded to all your sanctions and your lawsuits and your accusations and your conjecture, but the truth under the law is a complete defense. So if they sanction us and they say, well, you filed a frivolous lawsuit, which is what most of them are, or your malicious prosecution, which isn't even something a private citizen can do against the government. But when you look at these ridiculous lawsuits that they're filing, we come right back at them and they say, what are you going to say? We're saying the truth is a complete defense. If you really want to go to trial, we've been trying to go to trial for 3 years. You're the ones who don't want to go to trial, not us. Right. We've been asking for a jury for 3 years. We've been asking to go before a judge, and they haven't allowed it.
Well, I have to say that you and Leah, in my mind, you are the champions of perseverance. Almost anybody else would have kind of thrown in the towel and whatever, but you and Leah have been persevering, and I believe that God is going to honor that. Listen, how can we donate to your work?
Oh, I appreciate that. If you go to www.patriot Online. There's no .com or no .net. Just go to www.patriot.online. There's donate buttons there. There's a donate button for the litigation. There's a donate button for Patriot Online. Patriot Online, it's expensive. It's a social media platform, but it's also where we store all our documents.
Right.
We have our own cloud, and we've made everything available to people. We recently put up. I'm going to give you the link pretty soon. We put the book up there. We do have a link for people who can't afford to pay, the $20. So a donate button if someone wants to, download the book. We're working on that now. Leah and I are working on it so people can download the book for free. It's a color copy and it's watermarked. It just has a thing that just says media. I mean, it doesn't really, if someone tried to print the book and sell it, they'd have a problem. But if someone's reading it, they'd have no problem. So we're going to make this book available to the public. It's already on all the dockets. We've entered it into the national records. We're waiting to hear back from the House Judiciary Committee and Jim Jordan, waiting to hear back from them on the criminal allegations we filed with him and the committee. But all these things are available. If you go to www.patriot.online, we'd appreciate a donation. Whatever you can afford, $5, $10, $20. We're not funded. We're self-funded.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, I really want the audience to think, please go to patriot.online and donate. And then I think you'll be speaking at the Robert Varden Film Festival, and I hope you bring a lot of your books.
We will.
To sell at the festival. All right, thank you for coming on, and we really appreciate seeing you, and God bless.
Thanks, Richard.
Okay. All right, let me stop.